If you grew up in New Jersey in the 1980s, there's a good chance your childhood included things that sound fake when you explain them out loud. The places your parents let you go, things they trusted you with, experiences that would immediately get shut down today. Back then, New Jersey was louder, looser, and just a little bit more reckless, in a way that somehow worked out all right. Today, we're counting down 11 things from 1980s New Jersey that we'll never see again. Moments and places that defined the era and helped shape what growing up here really felt like. If this list makes you smile, cringe, or say no way, then congrats. You're Jersey to the core. If you grew up down the shore in the 80s, there's a good chance your summer memories include the old Long Branch Pier, and at least a few nights where your parents lost track of you for hours and just hoped you'd show back up near the arcade. This place was the summer destination. The air smelled like salt water and fried food. The games were screaming for attention, and crowds were packed so tight you moved at the speed of the slowest family arguing over tickets. Right in the middle of it all was the Haunted Mansion. Not a sleek Disney-type experience. This thing was dark, rattly, loud, and clearly held together by confidence and loose screws. You'd wait in line pretending you weren't scared, only to immediately regret that decision once the doors closed and something jumped out that definitely hadn't passed a safety inspection. Then came June 8th, 1987. A gas leak and electrical issue sparked a massive fire that tore through the pier. Winds pushed the flames fast, lighting up the shoreline and turning a place full of summer noise into something surreal and devastating. Fortunately, no one was injured or killed, but the pier didn't make it. By the end, the Haunted Mansion and everything around it were gone. After that, Long Branch felt quieter. That pier had been its heartbeat, where nights felt endless and every visit felt like an event. And while the town eventually moved on, that glowing, crowded, chaotic version of Long Branch is something no one who was there will ever forget. His prices are insane! If those words ring a bell, you undoubtedly remember Crazy Eddie, the New Jersey-based electronics store chain famed for its manic TV commercials. They ran non-stop, starring the wide-eyed, shout-at-your-TV pitchman Jerry Carroll, screaming about deals like he was trying to win an argument with the television itself. You could be half asleep on the couch and wake up knowing exactly where to buy a VCR. The stores were everywhere in Jersey, stacked floor to ceiling with electronics, sale signs, and chaotic energy. Shopping there felt urgent, like if you didn't buy that stereo right now, someone else definitely would. Behind the scenes, though, it was one of the wildest retail scandals ever. Founder Eddie Antar was inflating profits, skimming cash, and defrauding investors throughout the decade. When the truth came out, the chain collapsed in 1989. Antar fled the country but was eventually caught hiding and later went to prison. And just like that, poof! No more stores and no more screaming ads. Crazy Eddie vanished as fast as it arrived, leaving behind one unforgettable truth. In 1980s Jersey, even your electronic stores came with drama, volume, and a warning label. If you grew up in New Jersey in the 80s, there's a good chance your parents dropped you off at Action Park with a packed lunch, a slap on the back, and absolutely no concern for your continued survival. This was the kind of place where you showed up knowing something might go wrong. It was a sunburned concrete jungle where teenagers ran the rides, warning signs were treated like suggestions, and the phrase, "you'll be fine," carried real emotional weight. People called it Traction Park or Class Action Park, which honestly should have been printed right on the tickets. They had slides that shredded skin like cheese graters and a wave pool that felt like Navy SEAL open ocean survival drills. And that was the fun of it all. The place was so intense that local hospitals reportedly handled multiple injuries a day on busy weekends. Action Park even bought extra ambulances, not as a precaution, but because demand was that consistent. And yeah, the stories are darker than nostalgia usually gets. Multiple fatalities over the years eventually made the legend too big to ignore. It finally closed in the 90s, and sure, the site came back later with more rules and adult supervision. But the original 80s version is gone forever, because no modern park would ever let kids cannonball into danger like that. But of course, that's exactly why we still talk about it.
Long before Easy Pass scanned you through tolls at highway speed, driving the Garden State Parkway meant coming prepared financially.
New Jersey drivers in the 80s kept rolls of these tiny brass toll tokens rattling around in their ashtrays or cup holders. Tolls were 25 cents back then, and you could buy a roll of 40 tokens for $10, even if half of them eventually disappeared into the seat cushions. Pulling up to the booth was a small ritual. Window down, hand ready, then that perfect little clink as it dropped into the basket. No screens or scanners, just trust, gravity, and the hope you didn't miss the slot. Even when tolls jumped to 35 cents, tokens stuck around. Fewer per roll, same ritual. What's wild is how long they lasted. Parkway tokens were accepted all the way until the end of 2008, long after the 80s were a memory. Today it's all transponders and cameras, but there was something grounding about that moment. Slowing down, paying your way, and rolling back into traffic. That simple, clanky ritual is gone for good. But the sound of Jersey drivers doing 100 in the left lane lives forever. For a brief, glorious stretch in the mid-80s, New Jersey had its own professional football team, and not a fraudulent one that played in Jersey while insisting it was from New York. The New Jersey Generals of the USFL played at Giants Stadium and felt like a real point of pride. This was spring football, which meant decent weather, cheaper tickets, and parents who could say, yeah, let's go to a game without needing a payment plan. The Generals didn't mess around either. They signed Herschel Walker, fresh off his Heisman win, and later brought in Doug Flutie. Suddenly, New Jersey football fans had something new to argue about at the diner. In 1984, the team was bought by Donald Trump, who poured money into the roster like championships were sold wholesale. But the USFL aimed a bit too high. The league tried to move to a fall schedule, went head-to-head with the NFL, and famously won an antitrust lawsuit, only to be awarded exactly $1. With that, the league collapsed, and by 1986, the Generals were gone. If you still have a Generals hat or remember cheering in the Meadowlands, you remember how fun it felt. Short-lived, the Generals are now just a legend, frozen in 80s sports history, never to take the field again. In 1981, People Express Airlines did something that felt borderline impossible at the time. It made flying affordable for regular families. Based out of Newark's Old North Terminal, People Express turned Newark Liberty into the unofficial headquarters of, wait, we can actually afford to go somewhere? Airfare dropped so low it felt like a mistake. You could fly up and down the East Coast for around $25, and by 1983, a ticket to London cost $149, which was somehow cheaper than a long weekend down the shore with parking. Of course, you paid for it in experience. You bought your ticket on the plane. Seats were unassigned, which meant Dad speed walking down the aisle trying to keep the family together. Checked bags were $3, and that felt fair because there was a very real chance the pilot had just helped load them. Everyone working there did everything, owned stock in the company, and had the unshakable enthusiasm of people who truly believed this was the future. By 1986, People Express had blown up into Newark's second largest airline, nearly tripling airport traffic and proving that flying didn't need champagne, just prices low enough that a family of 5 could justify it. But the growth came too fast. Competition got brutal, a costly acquisition backfired, and that same year, the airline was absorbed by Texas Air. By 1987, the name and the legendary fares were gone. Still, for a lot of New Jersey baby boomers, their first flight started at Newark, clutching a handwritten boarding pass, hoping they could find seats together, and feeling like the world had suddenly gotten a lot smaller. In the mid-80s, New Jersey pulled off something no one has managed since. It made a tourism slogan everyone actually liked. And there's a good chance you first heard it while your parents were half watching TV, half packing beach chairs, as Governor Tom Keene strolled across the screen like a man who genuinely trusted you to enjoy the shore responsibly. He smiled while telling America, New Jersey and you, perfect together. And it seemed like everyone believed him. The ads were simple and wholesome, showcasing our beaches and boardwalks. For kids growing up in the 80s, those commercials were basically a signal that summer had arrived. You'd hear the slogan and immediately picture sandy feet in the car, arcade tickets stuffed in your pocket, and arguing with your parents promising just one more ride, even though it was already dark. What really says something is how long it stuck. Decades later, people can still hear that line in his voice without trying. The campaign eventually faded out in the 90s, replaced by slogans nobody remembered 5 minutes later, but Perfect Together was the last one that felt authentic, like New Jersey wasn't trying to convince you of anything. For a brief, unsettling stretch in the late 80s, the Jersey Shore stopped looking like summer escape and more like a toxic waste site. Instead of seashells, people were finding syringes, medical tubing, and hospital trash washed up right where beach towels were supposed to go. Kids were kept out of the water as beaches closed, and the phrase, "watch where you step," suddenly carried a lot more weight. The so-called syringe tide shut down large parts of the coastline during the summers of 1987 and 1988, scaring off tourists and reportedly costing the shore over $1 billion in lost revenue in 1988 alone. What made it worse was the mystery, until investigators traced the illegally dumped waste back to the Fresh Kills landfill. Someone had cut corners, and the Jersey Shore paid the price. It was such a cultural moment that it even made its way into Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire," forever locking hypodermics on the shores into pop history. The silver lining was that the people's outrage worked. Cleanup efforts intensified, dumping laws tightened, and enforcement got very serious. And thankfully, this is one piece of 80s Jersey nostalgia we're more than happy to leave behind. When gambling was legalized in New Jersey at the end of the 1970s, Atlantic City put the pedal to the metal, baby. By the 1980s, casinos were popping up at lightning speed, and the whole town felt electric. This was Atlantic City's golden age, when optimism was high, money was pouring in, and everyone walked around like they were just one lucky pull away from changing their life. Back then, AC wasn't just about slot machines. It was an entertainment capital. You could walk into a casino and see Howie Mandel, Jerry Seinfeld, Natalie Cole, or Jay Leno performing like it was no big deal. Headliners were everywhere, and showrooms were packed. Casino floors buzzed around the clock with tourists who truly believed they were in the middle of something special. Fast forward to today, and that version of Atlantic City feels distant. Casinos closed, jobs disappeared, and the city went through years of economic struggle and state intervention. The lights are still there, but much of the city now feels like a post-apocalyptic war zone. The wide-eyed confidence of the 80s, when AC felt unstoppable, faded into something quieter and more complicated. For those who remember it, though, that era still shines. A time when Atlantic City felt glamorous, hopeful, and very much alive. For generations of New Jersey shoppers, Bamberger's was a meeting place, a tradition, and a full afternoon commitment. Founded in Newark in 1893, Bamberger's, or BAM's if you grew up here, was where you bought back to school clothes, holiday gifts, and always ended up arguing with your father about why a $12 toy was a complete waste of money. The flagship store in Newark was huge, and once you went in, your mom wasn't leaving until every floor had been inspected. What a lot of people didn't realize was that Bamberger's had actually been owned by R.H. Macy and Company since the late 1920s. Macy's let it keep the name for decades, until October 5th, 1986, when every Bamberger's location was officially rebranded as Macy's. Overnight, the familiar signs were gone. They all got a Macy's logo slapped on, and it felt a bit different immediately. With that change came the end of Bamberger's charge cards, and no more saying, "Meet me on the corner by Bams," like everyone automatically knew where that was. It wasn't a dramatic ending, just a quiet one. There was a time when learning to drive in New Jersey meant facing one unavoidable rite of passage: the infamous traffic circles that used to be everywhere. These were massive, high-speed loops of pure uncertainty where multiple roads clashed together and everyone just sort of hoped for the best. If you survived circles like the Belmar Circle, Somerville Circle, or the legendary Marlton Circle, you earned your driver's license. There were no stoplights, and yield signs were more of a suggestion. You'd approach, grip the wheel, lock eyes with your passenger, and merge into a spinning mix of station wagons, delivery trucks, and drivers who still thought drunk driving laws were unconstitutional. Exiting was its own adventure. Miss your turn, and congratulations, you're doing another lap. As the 80s went on, state officials finally admitted what drivers already knew. These things were brutal. One by one, most of the circles were dismantled or rebuilt. The Marlton Circle eventually became an interchange, and the old airport circle vanished completely. Today, there are only a handful of true Jersey traffic circles left. And while they were stressful, confusing, and occasionally terrifying, they were unmistakably ours. And that's our list. 11 things from 1980s Jersey we'll never see again. Not because they weren't fun, but because they belonged to a different time. A version of Jersey that ran on trust, loose rules, and the assumption that everything would probably work itself out. Hopefully, this video brought back a couple core memories you didn't know were still rattling around in there. And if it did, share it with a friend you grew up with. We'll see you next time.